Greetings from Bill Back and Farmer Bill. The funds are at Mays Valley Farm Market and Winery, and I'm out in one of our pumpkin patches. And if you scroll back in the blog roll, this particular patch was the one that I talked about no-till rye and Roundup and glyphosate and modes of actions of burn down herbicides as well. This was a no-till field of rye from last year that we later killed with Roundup and then came in and no-tilled pumpkins into. And now we're looking at September 7th, 2009, and walking through one of our pumpkin patches. And it's been a tough road to hoe with the pumpkins this year. The weather was not ideal for them, but we're getting a pretty good, so we're getting a pretty decent crop coming along here in this patch in particular. And probably the big difference here is you can't see a whole lot of it here, but this had the rye cover crop in it. A lot of it's rotted down. Some crops you'll look and see there's a whole lot of rye left, and you think that's a good thing this time of year, but it really isn't, because that means that you don't have a lot of microbial action going on in your soil. And you really want to have a lot of bugs and critters working your soil over, because that's what creates more topsoil and creates just a healthier balance and nutrient release throughout the soil. So the rye did a reasonably good job here of holding the weeds down early, and then later it broke down and the pumpkins came along throughout the process. And you see we have a lot of pumpkins out here. But what I want to highlight in this field compared to our other pumpkin patch, the pick your own patch that I've been starting out along in, that one's choked full of lamb's quarters right now. And a lot of the reason is it didn't have a good rye cover crop that helped hold the weeds back in that particular one. It was soybean stubble that we later decided to put pumpkins into. But what we're fighting in this patch, you can see as you look across here, we have some really healthy looking green vines, then you have some yellowish looking ones, and you have some brown ones, like right here, these brown ones here, and they're pretty necrotic right there. They're looking pretty rough. All different things out here. We've been fighting molds and fungus like nobody's business this year. It's either been cold, damp, and rainy, or when we have nice weather like sort of today, we're coming with another cold front coming through. In the interim, we've had foggy mornings. Almost every morning we've had blankets and blankets of fog rolling across the fields. And what that does is it brings mold spores along, as I mentioned before. And if you look down here, you see the new growth, the pumpkin plant. The plant itself is still healthy. We've been able to keep the vines in reasonably good shape, but we're losing the battle. And the longer the season it gets, the more that goes. But you can kind of see here, we have a nice green healthy plant yet. Then we have ones here that have been infected by powdery mildew. And then we have ones that were infected later or earlier, and they're already giving up the ghost. We've been fighting this all along with what we know how to do. We need to come up with a better fungicide management plan. As I mentioned in the ride in the Hagee, we use that sodium bicarbonate, which is basically a salt, and it comes down and it knocks down what you have growing and existing on the plant. Then you come along with a product called Bravo Weather Stick or something of that nature that stays behind. But between the foggy mornings, rain all the time, even these measures are letting the fungus just continually come back and come back again. And you might say, well, what's the big deal? It looks like you got a healthy pumpkin crop in there, and we do. They're fighting along here. What you run into, as you notice, we have a nice orange pumpkin here with a nice green handle or stem on it, but I'm starting to see some lesions on there. And what happens along the process is the lesions get on there, and depending on the type of fungus, it will actually enter into the stem, and then it makes its way down into the pumpkin, reducing the shelf life of the pumpkin. What we like to do is have a pumpkin that's healthy it looks healthy on the outside, and it's healthy on the inside as well, because that way we can pick them early here in September, and they'll go all the way into October. And that's why we strive to keep the fungus out of the field. And it's very, very challenging given the weather conditions we've had with either cool, damp, rainy temperatures where the rain comes along and the spores are either in the air or on the soil. When the raindrop hits the soil, it splashes up on the vine or the plant or the pumpkin. Otherwise, it's also traveling through the air on those foggy mornings. As I mentioned earlier, the mold spores are on these plants, and they're on lots of plants throughout the countryside. They're in your flowers, they're everywhere. When the mold comes along, the pustules burst, and they released their mold spores into the atmosphere, or the air, and they tag on to those droplets of water. when they get a hold of that droplet of water, then they travel through the air as the fog, as you see the pretty fog moving through, and everybody says, oh, isn't that picturesque and beautiful? And no doubt it is. But what happens, it travels across, and if it happens to be hovering over my pumpkin patch as the sun comes out, and as the water vapor begins to evaporate, that mold spore doesn't evaporate, it drops. And it drops and it lands right on one of our leaves. And then it starts reproducing and multiplying and spreading like fire across the field. That's a little bit, or one of the ways that that mold species has adapted itself to survive. And you can see the track down here where the sprayer went. That's a wheel track right there, and it kind of makes you sick because you kind of run over things along the way. So once again, Bill Back and the Fun Czar in one of our no-till pumpkin patches. Always learning something new. They're doing really well given the weather conditions we've had this year. It's just been a tough year for the weeds and the fungus both. Always learning, always trying something new. Bill Back and the Fun Czar from Mays Valley Farm Market and Winery. Always in search of the great pumpkin. Thank you for stopping by.